You're watching Sci-Fi Saturday. Discussion and analysis of all your favorite sci-fi TV shows. Only on the Anthony James YouTube channel. Hello, and welcome back to our Star Trek Discovery analysis and discussion. I'm here with Emmett. Emmett, say hello.
Hello, Emmett. Wait a minute.
I didn't even say it that way.
I know, but I just always love that dumb joke.
Yeah, it's great. Okay, so here we are back again. We had I was about to say The Expanse because I've got The Expanse in the brain. We had episode 2 last week where we finally got back with the Discovery crew. This week we have got the Discovery crew in its entirety back together, you could say, because now Michael Burnham is back on the bridge.
Yes. Michael has returned, and we have seen her now after a year of being stuck in this post-Federation world and having to rejoin a crew that's got no context really for this universe at all now. Yeah. It's very interesting.
Very, very interesting. You might notice I've got my bolo tie on. So, the bolo tie. There we go. We can see it. Unbelievable. Cowboy hat. Howdy, partner. And the reason why I'm dressed like this is because I'm so excited that The Mandalorian is back. Now, we're going to be talking about Star Trek right now, but The Mandalorian is back, and it's got me in a cowboy mood. It's just so good. Anyway, actually, Emmett, 2 words. What did you think of this week's Mandalorian episode?
Absolutely fantastic.
Okay, let's get into Star Trek now.
Yeah. Well, again, we could talk all day about Star Wars, but back to Discovery.
Okay, so this week, the episode started out with Michael Burnham's sort of... We did theorize a little bit last week that Michael Burnham, we sort of were discussing whether it would be a little quick snapshot or we would actually see a whole episode of Michael's previous year. It turned out to be the quick snapshot. What did you think about that decision?
Well, I understand they want to sort of get moving with the plot, and I think they maybe want to hold back a little bit on what maybe Michael has been doing over this year and maybe have us learn with the Discovery crew. I think maybe Michael's had to do a few things that she's probably not proud of to survive, and maybe that goes against the sort of tenets of the Federation that she is trying to hold up, but we'll have to wait and see on that front. I enjoyed the little snapshot that we got, but again, I would love to learn more about that year. Again, maybe they'll cover it in the show, or maybe it will be one of those expanded universe novels that they sort of love to release for sci-fi shows,
Yeah, like they very quickly sort of established that Michael is changed from the experience a little bit. Definitely a bit more wavering on the whole Federation ideals. The idea of going behind the captain's back in this episode definitely sort of alluded to that as well. I also like the sort of little, even though you might argue that it was a little bit rushed, but at the same time, I really enjoyed the chemistry between her and Book in terms of referring to all these things they've done for the last year. Like, do you remember the Cosmo 456 or whatever?
It definitely did have that sort of like, are we going to do the rush, or you see that like when old pals get back together and they're like in the Avengers with Hawkeye and Black Widow, where it's like just like in Budapest, you and I remember Budapest very differently.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Actually, in terms of that, it's Black Widow, isn't it?
Yes, Black Widow.
Yeah, Black Widow. We're going to see Budapest, I think, aren't we, in the new film coming out?
I hope so. They talk about it so much that that I'd love to see it.
Yeah, I'd love to see it too. Okay, so Michael has the year. She's been a courier, slowly figuring out what happened. We find out that the burn. A bit more details about that. So the burn was every ship that had an active dilithium drive at the time, I think, just exploded.
Yeah, the warp drives.
Yeah, the warp drives. Like exploded, which obviously makes the Discovery a very valuable ship at this point. So when she comes back into the group, we get now I'm going to skip like sort of the initial hello everyone, how are we, because then they start talking about that they're going to go to Earth and this is the mission for this episode. They always throw it in there. Before we cover the idea of going back to Earth, what did you think about Michael's decision to give Saroo the captaincy with no conversation about it at all?
Well, I think it makes sense considering she's been sort of away for a year, and we obviously they've set up Michael in the sense of she's not sure if she necessarily still fits in with the Federation anymore from this context. We're going to explore that more during the rest of the season. And I am very happy again to have a very openly alien captain with
Yeah.
Saroo like taking the seat. And Saroo's had a great sort of arc from like the first season where like obviously with his species drive, being heavily slanted towards fear, and then his sort of evolution as a character where he's now become so much braver and so much more direct with people. I have loved watching him grow, and him becoming the captain, the man in charge of like the ship feels like a very natural progression for him. It's like, he was a bit nervous about it, but like the moment he sits in the seats and he starts, directing everyone, I'm like, that's my boy. He's all grown up now. He's like 7 foot something, but my little boy's all grown up.
Yeah. And actually, you mentioned there about his species, the Kelpians, being sort of submissive by nature. That, and then the whole idea of like the ganglia, remember that whole storyline? I thought that at the time was brilliant, like world or universe building. Like I loved whenever they go into the details of different species and things. I think that was one where it really hit home. That was really, really good. That I thought that was just some brilliant building. And if I remember correctly that they were sort of what they would actually die whenever they got to that age, but then they realized once they go through that sort of change, I can't remember what they call the change, but they go through they become more aggressive and sort of become the predator of the planet, because the ones who were keeping them oppressed were afraid of them.
Yeah, because it's like they were basically raised to think like prey, and this transition allows them to think more. And obviously, Sarah went through difficulties last season, learning to control these new spikes in emotion and aggression. And now he's sort of reached that sort of balance. It feels very earned. Discovery's done an interesting thing where oftentimes with Star Trek shows, the lead character is the captain to a certain extent. Like, it's an ensemble show and everyone's important, but obviously Kirk, Picard, Sisko, Janeway, those are like the main face of the franchise. Whereas with Discovery, Michael is the main face, but she's like a specialist, and now a commander. Yeah. And with Discovery, the first season,
number one.
She's number one. They've switched the captains, so I've enjoyed the fact that now Saroo has, made it into the. I don't hope that doesn't mean we're going to lose him at the end of this season, so that they can get a new captain. But I've enjoyed Discovery's journey with their captains, and that moving around.
Yeah, and it's really interesting to think back on like season 1 with Jason Isaacs. Like a big draw for me. A big draw for me to watch this show was actually Jason Isaacs. Hello to Jason Isaacs. I really, really like Jason Isaacs as an actor, and he's fantastic in nearly everything I've seen him in. So I was just that made me watch the show, and then obviously he turned into a bit of a Ned Stark of Discovery, didn't he? Actually, no, not even actually. It was not Ned Stark at all, because Ned Stark was honorable to the end, but still, in terms of the way he's no longer in the show, I mean,
he was a big face to draw us in at the beginning, and then unfortunately not around for very much longer after that.
It makes sense in the storyline though. But what did you think about? No, sorry, I wanted to ask you a question. Is Saroo the first sort of main, like the ship, the main ship of the show? Is he the first sort of human, I suppose, captain? Or human-looking, I suppose?
It's a good question. Let me just think very quickly. I think, obviously characters like Spock have reached the rank of captain, but as in from a perspective of leading the show, I'm pretty sure that we've always just had humans, at least in the main series show. In like the novels and other stuff, we might have had other captains of other species, but Saroo, I think, is maybe like the first alien captain that we've had in a mainline show, I think. Someone's going to correct me, I'm sure, in the comments in a minute.
Yeah, and we'll welcome that too. But
exactly.
Yeah, okay. So next up, we get a little emotional scene. Don't have to spend too long on this, but a little emotional scene between Tilly and Michael. Tilly is bringing some real humanity to this idea of jumping into the future, because it's something that sort of has been ignored at the minute. It's not been ignored. They've been too busy to worry about it, really. But the fact that now they're 900 years or whatever into the future, they've left all their families behind. They've left basically Earth as they knew it behind. It is a big shift, and I like that they touched upon this here.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting because they sort of framed the conversation around mourning and letting go. And it began with sort of Tilly discussing the fact that, she's having to deal with the fact that her family are no longer there, that she has to accept that they've been dead for hundreds of years. And then she sort of turns it around on Michael, being like, they were gone for a year. It's like, you let us go, you mourned us. She had sort of, on some level, accepted that maybe Discovery was gone and she was never going to see them again. And that's a very interesting conversation to have between two people, being like, you've already like had this mourning process, and you'd sort of, not forgotten about us, but sort of accepted that you may never see us again. And now you feel like disconnected. And it was a very, I can't think of another example of this sort of conversation in another show. And I very much enjoyed that,
Yeah, it's very analogous to real life. Like, this hasn't personally happened to me, but I know people it has happened to, where like they're in a relationship with someone, and like for one of them, they very much know the relationship isn't going to be there anymore. And for like 6 months, they're sort of mourning the end of relationship before it happens. And then when the relationship ends, one of them's able to carry on and the other one's completely destroyed by it. That's sort of where I was imagining it. Yeah, it is rough, I know, but it is analogous to this sort of situation. Obviously, we're not talking about mourning people being possibly dead, but you know what I mean. So that was a nice little moment. So next up, we get Saroo. I'm going to skip forward now. They get to Earth, and Saroo. I know Book has already entered the ship and all. We can talk about that if you want, in terms of Book coming into the ship. There was a little moment between him and Giorgio, where he was just like, hang on, why do I need to explain something to you? But
Giorgio being Michael's mum for a minute there, sizing up her romantic interests, and being a parent for a second. It's like when you meet your girlfriend's father for the first time, and vaguely threatening. Never to say that that's ever happened to me, but you see it all the time in films and stuff. But just Giorgio being like, what's going on between the two of you?
Yeah, like I
I
definitely had that with Ema's granda. Whenever I was about 17, sat down and quizzed me, definitely. But definitely Giorgio is acting a bit like a parent there. But basically, now they go to Earth. They find that Earth has this big barrier around the perimeter of it. I suppose you wouldn't really say perimeter. You kind of say, I don't know, the
force field.
Yeah, it's a force field, but you can't really say perimeter because, obviously the Earth is a 3D shape. But I think they said perimeter in the show. But anyway, there's Ndoyo, I think is the name of the captain of this new Defense Order of Earth.
Earth Defense Force or something like that. I can't remember the exact title of it.
Yeah, and they've sort of broken away from Starfleet, and they protect themselves now. And they order the Discovery to leave. What did you think about this whole idea that Starfleet is no longer centered around Earth in this sort of timeline?
I think it makes sense, considering that we've seen that basically Starfleet and the Federation was sort of nearly destroyed by the burn. They lost so much of their power and influence by the destruction of their ships and millions of their people.
Yeah.
I think, they're sort of setting up the fact that Earth has become much more centralized and sort of nationalistic is the wrong word, because it's for a planet, but like they've become much more Earth-centric and like so defensive of it that the Federation's about looking outwards, whereas this seems to be about looking inwards and protecting itself at any cost sometimes, and it's very dangerous. I think it makes sense for the darker world that we've been brought into, but it's definitely a depressing note for the episode. This change, but I think it sets up the stakes well.
Yeah, I would agree with you. I thought it was very interesting. I thought I was actually surprised when I first realized that they were going to go to Earth. Obviously, with the spore drive, they can go anywhere at any time, really. But I wasn't expecting to see Earth this early in the series in terms of where it is. I suppose we didn't really see much of Earth, but in terms of where it is. When we finally do see Earth at the end, which we'll get in more detail at later, but I like the idea that it doesn't actually seem like it's moved on too much. Like it doesn't actually seem like there's the same technology on Earth as there would be like on Book ship, for example. So by them isolating away a bit, maybe they've actually sort of stunted their own technological growth by not having the rest of the universe to draw upon.
Yeah, maybe they've harmed themselves, and they're probably on some level still recovering from the damage done by the burn. On the note of the spore drive, I thought the fact that the burn has sort of wiped out all warp-capable ships, it helps keep the spore drive very relevant within the show, because now it makes Discovery one of the few ships still capable of being able to travel these great distances without having to risk the explosion of using the delivering controls and the warp drive. So I think it was baked in well to the premise of season 3 on why Discovery is going to be so important to the efforts of restoring the Federation.
Yeah, I would agree with that 100%. What did you think? Well, like obviously, so then Michael deviates away from the Starfleet command and goes with Book to the ship and sort of goes around behind their back doing like a Toledo 464 or whatever they call it, and they go and they all happened very quick, is what I'll say. It happened very, very quickly, and then all of a sudden they've caught the captain when the captain of these raiders.
We don't see it happen. It happens off screen. It's like, yeah, we don't need to see that. We don't need to see them storming the bridge, capturing a captain. Yeah, that's not important. You don't need to see that. That can all happen off screen. That's fine.
Yeah, it would have definitely because they wanted to end the episode with the 10 or 15 minutes of like the sort of the storyline of them coming together. And like it was on Titan. Is Titan a moon of Jupiter?
I think Titan is a moon of Jupiter, yeah. So it's within our solar system.
Yeah, definitely.
So, I think that's sort of helping to illustrate how much the Earth-centric nature has ultimately harmed the human race because, all these other colonies have been cut off and it has led to tensions rising, let's say. Yeah,
and I'm not going to, this, as little spoiler as possible, this is very analogous to The Expanse. And I know, Emmett, you haven't watched it yet, but this is the idea of different human beings being all over the solar system. And because of that, certain political sort of problems arising through that is definitely a big part of The Expanse. So check that out.
I haven't seen The Expanse yet, but I have watched Babylon 5, and a big part of the history of Babylon 5 is the sort of like Mars rebellions and stuff like that, where Mars is sort of like responding or has responded to the fact that like they're being governed by Earth, and it's kind of like the almost American Revolution to a certain extent, where it's like, why are we being governed by these people who are not experiencing what we're experiencing? And I think it's a very interesting concept. It's honestly, if we were to leave the bounds of Earth and colonize other planets, I could see that happening in the real world, where it's like if we were to colonize Mars, eventually we would get the new Mars Republic or whatever, where they've broken away from Earth and, we have new Martians, so to speak,
Yeah, exactly. I could see that 100%, 100%. But so then I was going to talk about the idea that his helmet isn't actually his helmet. Like his helmet isn't actually his head. They take his helmet off and he's a human being. We obviously already talked about that he's a human being and the politics of it. But what was your reaction when they actually took the helmet off and it was just a guy underneath?
You have no smaller helmets?
Yeah.
That helmet looks very uncomfortable. I think he was wearing it because they sort of hand wave it or explain it away a little bit in the sense of like they originally. So we discover that this man is from Titan, the moon of Titan, and the colony and they had issues and had attempted to contact Earth, but the first ship they had sent down was basically shot down by this Earth's defense force.
Yeah.
In response. So I think to a certain extent he maybe designed the helmet and the look of the helmet for scare tactics, and it's like they'd sort of accepted that they weren't going to get help from Earth, so they're like, I need something ominous, I need something that inspires fear, and I think that was why the helmet sort of looked the way that it did. He was sort of going for an intimidation factor rather than a practicality standpoint. But definitely there was a moment. Yeah, there was definitely a moment when he took off the helmet. It was just a guy underneath. I was like, I will maybe make one comment on against Netflix here a little bit. As you're going into the episode, there's a still that sort of spoils the fact that he is a human. Yeah, where it's him with the helmet off. So like I'd already sort of seen the fact that this man was, actually a human.
Yeah.
So, and I'm like, maybe Netflix needs to be a little bit more careful about what stills they use for loading in the episode, because you don't want to necessarily reveal that. it sort
No
of
way.
ruins a little element of the episode
Yeah.
if you're hoping to be surprised by it, you know.
Of course, I actually didn't notice that at all, so I was personally surprised by it. Having said that, once he took the helmet off, I realized where they were going with the episode, and it made complete sense to me. So then there's a little extra sort of subplot in this episode of whenever the Defense Force of Earth, or whatever they're called, came in, they were all sort of searching through the spore drive area, and there was a young 16-year-old girl who I can't remember her name, or I think I can't actually remember, but I know she eventually turns out to be someone else, kind of. So she is, she's looking around, searching around, and eventually Paul Stamets actually just, goes, okay, here you go, and he explains the whole spore drive to her. Eventually then we find out at the end of the episode that this girl is actually the member of Starfleet that they've been looking for. Now, my understanding, Emmett, was that she is sort of an assimilation of everyone that's been attacked by... Can you explain that to me?
So this comes from an alien species known as the Trill in Star Trek, which have appeared originally in The Next Generation, but much more prominently in Star Trek Deep Space Nine, where an essential member of the crew, Jadzia Dax, was actually a Trill herself, / himself. So basically there's this symbiote, or this symbiotic creature, that can be sort of merged in with these other sort of human-looking aliens. I think they're all referred to as the Trill, which can get a bit confusing. Okay. But there's the symbiote, and then there's the Trill. And basically the symbiote can live for like millennia or thousands of years or hundreds of years. And it can be transferred from Trill to Trill, sort of passing on those experiences.
Okay.
And Trill's culture is sort of based around that. They work out, they find out who is sort of a good host, and like they set them up. And because the knowledge that these symbiotes carry over, millennia and hundreds of years of learning are so integral to their society.
Yeah.
So they move them from one species. They have been placed in human hosts once or twice before, but generally speaking, they would be placed within Trills. So Adira, which is what we eventually find out that her real name is, I think, because it was Admiral Adira. We find out that Admiral Adira was a host to this Trill and has passed away, and that the symbiote that was within Adira has now been moved to this 16-year-old Wesley Crusher-esque girl genius, who is now the host of the symbiote. But because she is a human and not necessarily trained, she isn't able to fully access the memories of the symbiote within her. So that, I imagine that'll be it's the Discovery's way of holding back probably very useful information to later in the season until it becomes sort of dramatically relevant. But Trills are a very interesting race. Not to go into spoilers for Deep Space Nine too much, but Commander, later Captain Sisko, knew Dax in a previous host, and then when he meets Jadzia in the early sort of Trek, he's surprised because like the body that he knew Dax was an old man instead of like this young woman. And we do eventually see Dax move into another host over the course of Deep Space Nine as well. So it's very interesting. I find it almost reminiscent of the Doctor from Doctor Who, in this idea of like you will move to a different body, and certain personality traits and information will pass over, but not necessarily one-to-one. They're like different beings almost, but still connected by this sort of ongoing thread. And the moment that they mentioned, that she was like, she had a Trill symbiote within her, I was like, oh, I'm 100% on board with this. I want to see where this is going. I find the Trill very interesting as a species.
So next up, we get, we've already talked about him having the helmet off and all that sort of thing, so we don't have to touch upon that again. What did you think about Michael Burnham becoming number one?
Well, I think, obviously it's, again, like with Saroo, it's been an interesting journey through Michael's career, because when we first are introduced to Michael in the beginning of Discovery, she is a first officer, but then obviously, she commits a little bit of treason, a little bit of, mutiny, and sort of becomes a criminal, and then goes on this journey of being a specialist. So seeing her then sort of come back into the role of a first officer is much in the same way as Saroo becoming a captain. Feels quite like a natural progression for her after she's been sort of, freed of these sort of restrictions. And I think it will be an interesting setup because obviously this episode has been hammering in, sometimes very unsubtly, the idea that Michael is a very changed person after her year. Yeah. And that maybe she doesn't always play by the rules anymore. But even though that, again, like I said, in the first episode of Discovery, she pulls a bit of a mutiny, so she's never been necessarily always the best at following directions. But, I'm curious to see. I feel like there's going to be a certain amount of conflict between her and Saroo, but I'm very excited. And I can't think of anyone else on the crew that I would have put in that role, as the first officer. So I think it makes a lot of sense to put Michael back in that position.
As long as you avoid it being Giorgio, then I think we're all good.
Yeah. If you, I think if Saroo had put Georgia as the first officer, we would have to file him away to an insane asylum, because why would you put Georgia in that sort of level of position of authority? That's that's dangerous.
I don't understand why she's just not in jail or something. But anyway, so.
Well, again, we're at the jails at the moment. We have no jails to work with, and
True.
desperate times.
Yeah. Okay. So last thing in the episode, we get to see all the cadets, all the sort of crew members at the big tree. Now, there's a few things I want to ask you about this tree. Obviously, one thing is that's a really old tree at this point. It's massive. Second thing I want to ask you is this something that I, as a non-sort of Star Trek fanatic, wouldn't really understand? Is this tree important in any other series?
I do, important is maybe a strong word. I do believe it has been referenced a few times because we honestly don't spend that much time at Starfleet Academy it's usually only visited every now and again in certain episodes, but there is I do believe there are references to a tree that people would sort of study under and such, and the idea that it's still standing, I think, is supposed to obviously be very symbolic of the idea that despite everything, the Federation is still in a way standing, because we have Discovery and stuff.
Yeah, and what the Federation stands for should still apply and everything like that. That's great.
It's very much there, and it was a very humanizing moment for the members of the crew, where they're just in this world where they've already lost so much. Tilly has sort of brought up that her family are gone, they've all passed on at this stage. To have something from the old world that is still there at a sort of an anchor point, where it's yes, so much has changed, but this tree remains. Starfleet Academy, it's not active, but it still is here. The buildings remain. I wonder if they maybe use it for something else nowadays, maybe training academy for this Earthfleet thing. But the fact that it's still there, I think it definitely gave them a moment to be yes, things have changed, but there are still, not to make a pun, our roots are still here, within this place, and it's still alive. And I thought it was a good sort of symbolic, again, not necessarily the most subtle image in the world, but I thought it was very evocative. I enjoyed that.
Yeah, I liked it too. So that brings us to the end of episode 3. We're really motoring on into this now. So where do you think it's going to go from here?
Well, obviously, Adira, I think, is going to be a very important character. She's a sort of Wesley Crusher-esque genius character with this, Trill within her that has potential secrets to unlock. And we're going to be going on a journey with her and the crew to find what is left of the Federation, and pull it back together. I still think it's possible by the end of the series we're maybe going to go back in time and stop the burn, but we'll have to wait and see. But I think for now the journey will be with Adira, finding out what we can from the symbiote within her, and also learning more about this post-Federation world and the alliances and that have formed in it. Because obviously, we've seen humanity, we've seen the Andorians, we've seen, a few other species. We also haven't seen where the Klingons are at this stage. We haven't seen where the Vulcans are. I think we're going to be the Romulans. We haven't seen where they are in this post-Federation world. We have a lot of species to check in with and see how they're doing. And I think as we journey through space, they're going to be sort of moving through space and finding allies slowly to rebuild things and to learn more. So,
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to it. So in terms of what I think is coming forward, I think you're exactly right. I'd like to see if they're going to introduce like a main storyline or highlight a main storyline. I think maybe finding out what happened with the burn is probably going to be the main storyline.
It does feel like it's the most because the characters in the show are so flabbergasted, so affected by that. It's like that shouldn't be possible. That shouldn't happen. And they're obviously highlighting how in universe this is, like thought of as impossible. So like it seems to be the main drive, the main mystery, what happened to cause this. And I think it's going to be part of the journey,
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to seeing it, to finding out what happens. All right, so that was episode 3, guys. I'm really looking forward to next week. I'm sure Emmett is as well. Any parting comments, Emmett?
Just that I want to say thank you everyone in the comments for the last episode. Again, I got speaking to a lot of people and you were all very lovely. And I enjoyed our conversations. And I'm very excited to see where the rest of the season goes. And also watch Mandalorian as well. They're both great shows. We don't need to fight.
Yeah, we don't need to fight. Yeah, exactly. All right. Thanks very much, everyone. Make sure you subscribe to the YouTube channel to catch us next week. We're going to be back every single Saturday. We've deemed Saturday on the Anthony James YouTube channel Sci-Fi Saturday. So that you'll expect more coming. So Emmett and I have already started talking about after Star Trek's done, what sort of things we're going to be covering after that. It'll all hinge on what we've both seen or what we're both interested in. But hopefully it'll be in the sci-fi genre. If it isn't, I'll have to rebrand the Saturday. Doesn't matter. But
the branding is so strong, James. It's so strong. Sci-fi Saturday.
We're quite fluid here on the Anthony James channel. We can adapt with the times. Right, Emmett. Well, thanks very much for joining me again, and I will see you next week.
Yes, and we shall see you all next week as well.
Yeah. Okay. See you later. Bye-bye. You're watching Sci-Fi Saturday. Discussion and analysis of all your favorite sci-fi TV shows. Only on the Anthony James YouTube channel.